So in this video, we are trying to learn how to use Excel to generate frequency distribution for a quantitative variable. So on this spreadsheet, I'm showing you 120 students GPA. So it's none of that from my student in the classroom because it's the data. And so I just want to use that example to show you how you actually can create frequency distribution using the pivot table method. So back to years ago, I usually teach the bin range. And later, I actually realized that it's not as efficient as a pivot table. So therefore, I only want to emphasize this method called the pivot table method. And so you can see in the first column, column A, we have the student GPA. So we had 120 students. Like I said, we are using the pivot table method. However, before we start, I want to give you some idea about how I want to define my classes. So for the GPA, that's the first step you have to do when you're doing the quantitative data. That is, you have to identify your classes before you can move forward to use the pivot table to define your classes. So let's see, I define the GPA classes as following. So the first class will be from 0 to 0.5. The second class will be from 0.5 to 1. And the next class 1 to 1.5, etc. So some students are going to ask me, wait, Dr. J, you told us in the class that the classes has to be non-overlapping, right? Yes, I said so. And so why you design these classes have overlapping? So for instance, 0.5 is showing in the first class and also showing in the second class. So what's happening here? So what I want to emphasize that later you're actually going to see this kind of notation on the pivot table as well. So when you see this kind of notation, so you see the overlapping, but it actually means only one class have the boundaries. So the first class you see is 0 to 0.5. So what happened here is what real class we are talking about here is GPA larger and equal to 0.5, but smaller than 0.5. And the next class will be the GPA smaller or larger and equal to 0.5 but smaller than 1. The next class will be the GPA larger and equal to 1 but smaller than 1.5, etc. So you can see that every classes you only including the lower boundary. So some students can say, okay, how about the last class will be from 3.5 to 4. Some students say, so if you're only including last class, how about 4? We do have students can get GPA equal to 4, right? So that's something you have to remember. So the last class, so that will be the situation that both lower and upper limit are included. So that is last class. So that's what I want to mention, because you are going to be the one to use Excel to generate the frequency distribution. You have to be able to read the number correctly. You have to understand, okay, what is the class is representing. So so this is one situation you might see. In some other situation, you might not be able to see the overlapping. So maybe it end up, let's see, 0 to 0.4 and a 0.5. Oops, sorry. 0.5 to 0.9, and then Excel said 1 to 1.4, etc. You will be able to see those situations too. So if that's what you see from the pivot table outcome for the classes, so that actually means both lower and upper limit are included. So when you are using this half closed the equation, half included the boundary, is when you see the outcome is having overlapping. So that is how I want to teach you how to read your outcome you get from Excel. So let's do it together. So before we use pivot table, I want to emphasize. So look, I mentioned in the class about how to figure out the class levels, right? So first of all, we have to know for this variable, what is the minimum possible value we can get. So the minimum possible value we can get is 0, right? GPA can be 0. What is the maximum value we can get regarding GPA itself? It can be 4. So now what I want you to identify is to look at my class width. So basically for each class, how wide it is. So I mentioned in the class, it is totally wrong if you're using upper limit minus lower limit, upper limit minus lower limit. So the right way to figure out the class level is to use next level's upper limit minus the previous class upper limit. So basically, for instance, look at the third class and the second class. So the next class will be the third class. So the upper level is 1.5. And the previous class will be this class. So the upper level is 1. So the class width will equal to 1.5 minus 1 and equal to 0.5. Okay. So we need these three information before we can use the pivot table to generate our frequency distribution. So first, let's go to Insert tab and then choose Pivot Table. So after you select the pivot table, and then make sure you include everything, especially the labels. Again, if you're using the pivot table method to generate our outcomes, you have to include the labels. And then I will place my pivot table in the existing spreadsheet. You definitely can create a new worksheet. The reason I want to put it in the same worksheet because I want to show you when we can use these three information we identify here. So let's click OK. So after you click OK, you will be able to see on the right-hand side, you instantly will be able to see the pivot table field. And what you need to do is drag. So first, choose GPA. Again, if you don't see the name GPA, instead you see the value, that means when you initially selected the data, you didn't include the label. So therefore, you have to reselect your data. So you click the GPA and hold it, and then drag down to rows. And do it again. Click the GPA, and then drag down to values. So you can see instantly on my right-hand side, you'll be able to see two columns, rows, and the sum of the GPA. So obviously you notice that it's totally different what we see normally as a frequency distribution because there's just too many classes, right? Too many classes. I already defined the classes here. So I want the first class is from 0 to 0.5, second class from 0.5 to 1, etc. So how can we do that setting? So in order to do that setting, you're going to do is under the row labels, choose any of the row label, any. So literally any. So you can choose 1.5a or choose 2, whatever you want to choose. Choose 1. And then right-click the mouse. And then find there is an option called a group. Think about when you are defining classes, you are grouping your value, right? So we call it group. So once you click group, now you see we need to fill in the three blanks. Now you should suddenly realize why I ask you to figure out minimum, maximum, and the class width at the very beginning, because we actually going to use those values to fill in these three blanks. So let's do it together. So starting at, let me just put 0 because that's the minimum amount of GPU you can get. And then the ending, so that's the maximum amount GPU I can get is 4. However, the class width, the by means class width. So we just calculate the class width is 0.5 instead of 1. So then we're changing to 0.5. So after you did that, you can click OK. So it looks kind of almost like what we should, almost look like what frequency distribution should look like. However, if you look at the right-hand side, which the second column here, is supposed to be my frequency. If you think about frequency, you're counting the number. Can counting number be non-integer? Of course not. So you can see all the numbers here are not integer. Therefore, we actually have to do some adjustment. So in order to do the adjustment, you just need to choose one of the value under here, in the second column, any value, 0.5 or 1.486, etc. Choose any one. So I choose 33.796, right-click the mouse, and then we're going to do summarize the value by. Now you can see why you are not getting the integer, because they are summing the observation value instead of counting it. So therefore, we're going to choose the second one, counting the number. Now you will be able to see, okay, everything is integer, and the grand total here is supposed to be my sample size, and that we did say this is my sample size. So this is my frequency distribution. Okay, some students say, wait, Dr. J, it is missing classes because we're supposed to start from 0. Where is my 0? And we're supposed to have that, right? You are right. So how are we going to be able to adding those cells that is hidden, and also why they are hiding it? So for like my first class, 0 to zero point 0.5, where they are. So actually, by default, the Excel will hiding the classes that have 0 frequency. So basically, for my data set, we don't have anybody is between 0 and 0.5. How about you just want to show it? So how about you just want to show it? So there is a quick way to do it. So under the row labels, right? I chose any of the label there, right click the mouse, and we're going to go to field settings. So the field settings, so under the field setting, you're going to choose the second one, layout and print. Layout and print. So you can see on the bottom you have three options: repeat item labels, insert blank lines. Oh no, you notice that the last one, show item with the no data. So that's what we are looking for, because those classes have no observation, therefore they are not showing that. We need to check this box so that we will be able to see those classes has 0 frequency. So we check the box and then we can click OK. Now you will see we adding more classes smaller than 0. Of course, you cannot achieve, but starting from here, 0 to 0.5, and so we do need that class. So now students say, oh wait, there is no value. Should we manually put in 0? Please don't do it. We just need to do a few settings, and you'll be able to see 0 in those unique classes. So let's do under the row labels, right? Choose any label, right click the mouse. So this time we go to pivot table options. Pivot table options. And after you click pivot table options, if you look at here, they are checked called the full empty cells, so show blank. So now you understand why the 0 frequency actually is blank, because the setting on the Excel is that the full empty cell show blank. So instead, show blank. So make sure you check this box. You should type in 0. So now you can click OK. Now you are seeing the 0 frequency now, right? Yes. So this is how we use the pivot table to get our frequency distribution for a quantitative variable. And so the next 1 or 2 minutes, I will show you how to get our histogram. So histogram. Histogram is very different from bar chart. Why? Because for the gap between two bars are 0. So there's no gap between two bars. For bar chart, we have to keep the gaps. So now we're going to look at how we're going to developing our histogram for this case. So first of all, select the 2 columns. Keep in mind, do not include the grand total, because the grand total is not a class, it is just a total. So if you include it, so you will have a very long bar for the last class. So you know that's wrong, right? So make sure do not include grand total. And then after you select this row label and column label columns, and then go to the insert tab, and then go to where we were when we try to find a bar chart. And so in the chart area, we're going to use the first one, and then we're going to still use the column chart. So still use the column chart, and we select the column chart. So once you select column chart, you will notice that, oh yeah, that's the bar chart, right? Because there is gaps. So what can we do in order to make it look like our histogram, which means we're going to close the gaps. So what you need to do is select the blue bar, left double click the blue bar. So once you left double click the blue bar, you'll be able to see the format data point on the right hand side showing up. So make sure you are choosing this. The third icon look like multiple bars. It's called the series options. So this is where you're going to adjust the gap between 2 bars. So look at the last option, gap width. So currently it's 200%. So in order to close that gap, we just make it 0. So type in 0 and then push enter. Now you see this is our histogram. So there is no gap between bars, and we have well-defined classes name under each bar. So this is histogram. Keep in mind, don't forget to close the gap if you are working on the histogram. Again, histogram is for quantitative data. Bar chart is for categorical data. So don't mess up. So good luck with your work.